Now, for more on the latest developments in Egypt, I am joined by my colleague, Middle East correspondent Elizabeth Arrot, who joins us from Cairo via Skype. Good evening, Elizabeth.
Good evening, Shaka.
How are you today?
Very well. Curious about what's going to come next.
Yeah, give us a sense of what is happening on the ground from your vantage point, Elizabeth.
There is a lot of rising tension over when these results will be announced. There's a possibility there'll be a delay. The commission has to go through some 400 different appeals of alleged violations in the vote. And so everyone was expecting an answer Thursday on who's going to be the winner. It still could be, but the margin of victory is very small. And there's been some reports of stepped up security and these challenges, and people are just getting a little bit tenser even by the hour.
Have you been able to find out or to establish as to why the two candidates both happen to have declared victory in their favor?
Well, it seemed Mr. Morsi declared quite early on, just within actually about 6 hours of the polls being closed, and that was based on televised counts of each individual precinct of the voting, and most people seem to agree with that. Mr. Shafiq has not given evidence of why his claim should be considered, but we don't know about these appeals, and some of the decisions that have come from the Presidential Election Commission have seemed to favor Mr. Shafiq all along, and he was, of course, allowed to run even though he had been a member of the old Mubarak regime, which was a law passed by the parliament, the now dissolved parliament. So we've seen them make favorable decisions for him, and so that I think is part of what making people nervous, that maybe something's in the works after this quite.
What about the latest steps taken by the armed forces, the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces of Egypt? There are some people who are actually saying that if the council knew for sure that it was General Ahmed Shafiq who was in the lead, that they probably would not have done what they just did a couple of days ago, really, by essentially almost coming close to what some people have declared a military coup against the election, really, or against the democracy for that matter.
It is unusual. It got a lot of criticism for what it did, both from abroad and at home. There was a big demonstration last night, actually more to do with the dissolution of parliament, but also to show the forces that Morsi can pull out in support of him on Tahrir. It was about 50,000 people. Even the initial reaction to that declaration, the constitutional declaration, they seem to back off it a little bit on Monday and Tuesday. So it's unclear. There are so many things going on behind the scenes and so few very, very clear answers that this breeds a fair amount of suspicions and rumors. And I think until we hear what they're going to decide tomorrow or hopefully shortly after that, it's hard to really know what's happening next. I think the last week has proven that.
Elizabeth, talk to us about the status of deposed President Hosni Mubarak, because we've been getting conflicting reports, really. There are some who suggest that the former president is in a coma. There are others who actually said that he, in fact, had been declared clinically dead. Are you getting anything different from that so far, Elizabeth, from your vantage point?
Yes, there are quite a few different versions of what happened yesterday. One of them, most recently, the New York Times was able to get access to someone who said actually it was just Mr. Mubarak had a fall yesterday in his prison hospital room. We've heard reports of his death several times over the last year. One of the things that has been unusual is that he's been trying very hard to leave the Tor prison hospital where he had been kept since his sentencing at the beginning of June for his role in the connection of the killing of protesters. He initially didn't even want to get off the helicopter that had taken him there. He's had various health crises since then. He's now been moved back to a military hospital outside the prison, And all along, his lawyers have been pushing for this very hard, and that sort of overshadowed the reports that he was clinically deaf, which had been retracted earlier by Interior Ministry officials.
Is it possible, Elizabeth, as some have suggested, that perhaps both Mubarak supporters and some among the authorities are exaggerating his condition so that he doesn't have to go to prison after all? He ends up in a comfortable military hospital somewhere.
That certainly is the suspicions of many people who opposed Mr. Mubarak. It was actually rather distasteful last night when the news was that he had died. There were fireworks all through my neighborhood, which is very close to the hospital where he's being kept now, that shows the real anger towards him, even though he has been sentenced to prison, that the anger has not gone away. I think the fact that he's been moved out of prison when everyone knew he didn't want to be in there will continue to anger people.
Talk to us, Elizabeth, about the Muslim Brotherhood candidate Muhammad Morsi, a man, I gather, actually did go to school at the University of Southern California, a school, as I told you a little bit earlier when I was at UCLA, we used to refer as the University of Spoiled Children.
Well, I don't think he qualifies for that. Yes, he did. He was educated first here in Cairo, and then he did do graduate work in California. He lived there for quite a while. Both his sons were born there. His children are American citizens. He has tried to sort of downplay his connections there. He's got a very strong. I had the opportunity to go spend a day with him in his native village of Edwa. And it's a very simple village. When he gave his campaign stump there, he talked about how his father used to, take him to school on a donkey, and he showed me his chickens and ducks. And, he obviously has other houses too, but he still keeps the village life going. He is not probably the most charismatic of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders, but he's a very solid man. And what many people are hoping, he will build some kind of coalition that will bring in other people from other factions, revolutionary, leftist, socialist, just so that they can get, nobody's really a technocrat at this point, and they're going to need a lot of help just to get the country up and running again.
Is it true that both Morsi and Ahmed Shafiq come from the same area?
Yes, I believe Shafiq is also from, also near Zagazig in Sharkaya in the eastern delta. So it is, and I also believe Mr. Mubarak was from there as well. I'm not sure what's up there that produces all these leaders, but it'll be interesting to see.
Sounds like a presidential region. We gather, of course, that Ahmed Shafiq did do much better than Morsi during the first round of the presidential election. What kind of feedback are you getting from there? Who do they seem to be behind, really, this time around?
Well, just one thing. Actually, I think Mr. Morsi actually did beat Mr. Shafiq a little bit in the first round, but again, not that many people, when you look at the overall vote, voted for either of them. More people voted for neither of them than voted for the two of them combined. So you have in this round, I think a lot of people were very disappointed. When I was at the polls, people would say, I didn't want to do this, but I feel I have to take some kind of choice. So a large amount of reluctant voters. And of course, we had people who boycotted it completely or went to the polls and nullified their vote to show some kind of disapproval of both of them. It was certainly the first round, everyone was very enthusiastic, thinking the possibilities were endless. And then to end up with these two representatives of what many people feel were the dynamic of the last 50 years, the Muslim Brotherhood versus the establishment. And that is the final choice after the revolution, was a little disillusioning to many.
Final question. When you move around downtown Cairo and you talk to some people, do you still get the sense when you see them straight in their eyes that they indeed believe that what they have been experiencing all along has actually been a revolution or something else?
That's a very good question. I think as people are going forward now, I think the initial euphoria of the revolution, that certainly is past. It's been 16 months. We really they have no constitution. There's no parliament. There's this dispute over the president. The SCAF has taken more powers. It's very depressing. But what people consistently say, and it's sort of across the spectrum, is that the people really do feel empowered now. And even in little villages, you go out in the farmlands and people say, well, if things don't go well, I'll just vote him out of office. And if he doesn't go, I'll go down to Tahrir Square. And that may be the most fundamental change of the revolution.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your insight.
Pleasure to join you.